welcome to Spotlight Autism. My name is Leslie Grubler, and those of you who are fervent watchers of Spotlight Autism, you've probably realized already that we are in a new studio this evening, and it's the inaugural show of our new studio, Studio B. You'll see the lovely gold drapery behind us, so we're very excited, and we have this beautiful table, which I understand is not from IKEA. But nevertheless, today we have a very special guest with us. Her name is Carmen, and she is a speech-language pathologist. She works not only with children with autism, but with many children with many different developmental disabilities, and she's been working in the field of speech-language pathology for nearly 30 years. So I'd like to welcome Carmen to our show.
How do you do?
Tell me a little bit about what your career has been like, Carmen. 30 years as a speech-language pathologist, that's a long time.
It's been an adventure, a big adventure. The field of speech therapy has changed dramatically since I first started. Initially we had our little DLM cards with the pictures on them, and there was no formal testing for the children. If the children needed services, the teacher would pull you into the classroom and say, I think Johnny needs speech. And you'd go and you'd screen him, and sure enough, if he was approved by the principal, he would get the services, and it was very easy. And then it got harder in terms of all the different evaluations and having children declared in need of special education as opposed to just needing speech. And parents became very wary about allowing their children to be tested until we did the PR work and got them more involved and to understand what was going on. That was in the elementary school level that I worked in it for a while, and then I started working on the preschool level. And that was a hoot. I love preschool because they're not quite ready for prime time, so to speak. But they want to communicate, some of them, and so you try to get them to learn to play, and through play to communicate with their friends and not bop them on their head or bite, which many of them do.
Now that whole idea of play and learning how to communicate with play or through play, tell me about that. Why is that so important? Like, why, maybe 30 years ago when you had started, was there more of an emphasis for children and parents to be drilling and in terms of improving their speech and language, and now we have a little bit of a change to developing communication through play? What have you seen in terms of?
What I've seen is that, yes, you're absolutely right. Initially it was extremely drill-oriented, memory-oriented. I remember when I initially started working in the elementary school, I had groups of children that just would not communicate with me at all. And they also were not communicating in the classroom, which is why they were declared in need of special education. And at that time, there was that game, I've forgotten the name of it now, but at any rate, I devised a game in which they had to memorize. This is where the memorization part came in, but they had to compete also. They memorized all the states of the United States and the capitals and the flowers in order to win this game. And I started with the puzzle. We learned how to use the puzzle, we started, and then from there, because many of these kids had been left back many years and were really supposed to be in high school or junior high school, depending on their age, I taught them how to go to the parent of the mother of the child that they wanted to go out with and ask how to ask for a date. I really did, and I taught them how to read a newspaper so that they could know where the movies were playing and how much change to make, and I integrated all of that rather than forcing them to learn the different steps that went into it.
So you kind of were a leader in the whole idea of integrating the work into their lives.
Yes,
right?
yes. I try very hard to integrate the work into their lives. I also discovered, because I got interested in neuro-linguistic programming and hypnotism at that time, all at this time, I discovered, and I read an article about learning disabled children and relaxation, and how if you can get them to relax, you can get them to learn better. So I said, I could do that. So I did, and 5 of my kids fell asleep on me. It was like they had never experienced that total relaxation, you know. And I said, and I went to the teacher, and I says, I help me.
Right.
No, I got them back out. I got them back out. But it was all the result of learning how to do easy relaxation, visualization, teaching them how to visualize things like being on a cloud, or tightening and relaxing their bodies. And I even do that now with my preschool and my the very young ones. When I notice that they're extremely hyper, or they just don't have a sense of what it is to relax. So what I do is I pace them with my speech. I slow down my speech. I slow down the activity. I try to give them a little bit more of a sense of what it feels like, so that they can hopefully internalize the feeling. It's very hard to tell somebody in the midst of a crying jag, relax.
Right.
You can't, I mean, it's an impossibility. But if you can get them to feel it in another form, pretend you're a tree. Let's do slow walking. Okay, let's walk down the street. Okay, let's breathe. I had even one child this summer. I did some subbing work at a preschool, and one of my kids was extremely hyper at home and at school. Did not know how to relax. And I gave him a little mantra. So he says, yes, I know. He says to me, put my hands on the table, breathe through my nose, out through the mouth. I said, you feel a little bit better? He said, a little bit. He would forget, you know,
Right.
he'd go off, but at least he started, it was a
Yes,
start.
it
was a
was.
start.
So now you mentioned about just slowing your rate of speech. Why, can you share with our parents who are listening, why would that be a really good strategy for a parent to use with a child?
Slowing your speech does several things. Number one, it cues by hearing what it is that you want the child to do. Children function and on the unconscious level most of the time. They really don't understand when you tell them. That's why I never tell a child you're on timeout, because they don't know what that means.
They don't know what time is.
And they
so
don't know what time,
therefore,
exactly.
right.
They have absolutely no idea what time is, so why go into that? So what I do is in fact, I train a lot of my parents to do this. I says, you slow your speech. 2 things are going to happen, okay? When you slow your speech, your child's pace will slow down. And also I said to them, don't do this if you're upset, because slowing your speech and your body giving a different message, 2 different things.
Right.
So you don't do this when you're in a hurry. You got to make that appointment, and Johnny hasn't put his shoes on yet.
Right.
This is not the time to do it. But you can tell them, now it's time to take a bath, and we're going to take off our shoes, and I love those toes that you have. Oh, they're gorgeous. I'm going to kiss them today. And let me see that belly button. And you can go into body parts this way, and as long as you have the child engaged,
Yes.
you can get them to concentrate, and it'll go in further. Also, it helps speech.
You know, it's very interesting just listening to you talk. I'm finding myself becoming very relaxed as well, and I hope we haven't lost our audience.
I hope not.
Because maybe they're falling asleep on us. I hope not, but it is very relaxing just how you're sharing this. And, you know, I can see certainly where it would be a great strategy. And we really can tell that you're a speech-language pathologist because it's so unconscious on your part how you're modulating your voice up and down and up and down and slowing your rate and then quickening your rate at various parts, and as a result, maintaining attention. And it's so interesting how that particular gift that you have can be so effective with children.
Thank you. But it is very effective with children, and parents come back to me and tell me that it's working with them. Many times I've had to actually train the parent prior to, just to have them practice a little bit with me so that they understand what it's like. Because, as you know, people also may not have an internal sense of what it's like to relax.
Sure.
And many of the families that I deal with, because of the stressors in their lives, have a difficult time relaxing. So it's sort of I'm doing sort of a double training, training the children, but I'm also trying to give the parents a taste of what it's like.
Yeah, and isn't it so interesting that so much of our work as speech-language pathologists is not only with the child, but it's also with the parent. And sometimes it's only with the parent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Many times parents just don't have a clue as to what they need to do, and they are so stressed out that I have to start with them.
Yeah.
I can give you an example. Recently I was working with a little boy, and he could throw tantrums that were impressive. I mean,
Very impressive.
Oh,
yes.
God, yes. And his father did not want to take him out because every time he took him out, if he said, "We have to leave now," the child would just throw himself on the floor, and it became a struggle between the two of them and the mother also. They were young parents. They didn't know what to do with him, and basically they were resorting to bribery. If you do this, I'll give you a soda. Come home, I'm going to show you your favorite show, And it was almost pleading with the child so that the child would allow them to do what an adult would do.
Right.
And basically what I helped them realize was that they're the ones that pay the rent, and they're the ones that need to be in control. And as long as a child is not in danger of hurting themselves, if they throw themselves on the floor and they're not in danger of hurting themselves, and you are present at all times during that particular episode, let them cry it out. And periodically, what I tell parents to do is I go up to the child and say, "Do you want water now? Would you like a little water? You look a little thirsty." Johnny's still throwing the tantrum. Let him continue throwing. Okay, I guess you're not ready yet. Okay, and you wait it out. And then once two things will either happen. One, he'll either give up, realize that the parents are not going to give in, and then come and want to cuddle or something, or they'll fall asleep because they get so tired. But if the first instance, if it does happen that way, what I tell the parents to do is to say they're so happy that now you're ready to drink your water, and now we can play,
right.
Or we can, whatever it is that would be a joyful experience for the two of them. Now we can play. Look, I'm having so much fun with you now, rather than trying to cajole them.
Right, and coming from mommy and daddy, that's very important.
Exactly.
So you have this incredible background, and you've integrated so many different things into your work. And then sometime in the 1990s, you decided that you were going to go the route of bilingualism. Tell me a little bit about what made that decision. What made you go that route in terms of reaching children?
I've always been bilingual. Okay, I grew up in a Hispanic home, even though my last name, my maiden name is Kowalski. So they were always looking for the blonde kid behind me. They were never looking for Carmen. It was just a natural thing, you get a Polish name. But I grew up as, my first language was Spanish. And so when I went into the school system, as soon as they knew that I was Spanish, they would put me in the Spanish schools. But then the law came into effect in terms of bilingual extension. I took it as to become part of the system in terms of getting my certification, but not because I did not have the information already under my belt,
Right.
both culturally and language-wise.
So how do you feel? You've gotten the bilingual extension, which is the certification that allows you to now treat children bilingually
Right.
in terms of speech-language pathology. Why is that important? And why is it important today? And why is it important in the city of New York?
Why is the bilingual extension important in the city of New York? Sometimes I look around and I say to myself, a lot of people who have taken the bilingual extension, the people that I see practicing, aren't really bilingual. So how they pass, I have no idea. They're good students. Right. They're good at learning a language. They're good at at taking a test, and so they passed, and now they consider themselves bilingual. But to say that they know what it's like to be a bilingual therapist, I don't think so.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into the culture, and it's not because I'm trying to make myself more important than others, but for example, unless you've grown up in a project, you don't know what it's like to live in a project. Okay, unless you've worked in an area that is heavily Hispanic and heavily poor, extremely poor, and you walk in and you don't know how to deal with that, how to deal with the cultural aspects of it when you walk into a home like that. What do you say? What are the idiomatic expressions that are used? How do you make these families feel comfortable enough to be able to share with you what it is that's really bothering them, and not just what they think society wants to hear? It's a dance. Excuse me, it's a dance. And I don't think that just because you have a bilingual extension, it gives you that. It really, I really don't feel that to be the case.
So it's much more. It's much more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is a lot more than that. Even the integration of the family, the nuclear family, and how to deal with who it is that lives in the home is important.
So given your background, do you have a real window into seeing children who are bilingual and seeing children who are bilingual typical and seeing children who are bilingual and atypical? Now, you know, currently in the city of New York, they're really looking at this issue to ensure that our bilingual children are not considered special needs when they truly are not. They're just second language learners.
Exactly.
What has your experience been with that as a speech-language pathologist who is bilingual?
It's something it's sort of become like almost a how can I explain it? A chaos that you expect everything to sort of get mixed, and then all of a sudden it settles. I've been reading quite a few articles on the subject recently, and a lot of things have come up recently in terms of, in fact, I just found out that a very well-known test, I won't mention it because I'm not going to give anybody, but a very well-known test.
And we're talking a standardized test.
Which is a standardized test, is they mandated that only that particular test be used now with the bilingual children. And now I hear that going to be considering both, if a child is dual language, they're going to use both languages for the scoring as opposed to one language. So it's not going to be a monolingual Spanish test, it's going to be a test that tests for language.
Okay.
Which has always been my...
So do you think that'll have a positive impact or a negative impact? What do you think?
I don't know. I'd have to see the test. I was not impressed with the English version of the test. I think it's really, many children are not being accepted into programs based on this standardized test, which I think is, it's not what is the word I'm looking for? It's not giving enough information. It doesn't give enough information. It's almost like you give a screening and you get 2 or 3 things, and okay, the kid is able to do that. And you know very well that that child is not able to do it.
So you're finding, do you think you're finding more so that the bilingual children who have issues, those issues aren't teased out? Or are you finding more so that the bilingual children are just simply bilingual children and they're not scoring well?
Actually, now with the current information that's coming out, I'm better able now to justify having a child stay, if I really feel that a child is in need of services, I can better justify it, but it reads more like a research paper than an actual evaluation, because I have to quote research that was done in other, in articles, because the tests themselves do not pick up on the information. My concern more with bilingual children, specifically the children that I know, the Hispanic children, they tend to be they don't do well on tests. Things that you know that they know, as a clinician, you've been in there for months and months and months, you know that they have it. A stranger walks in, they completely shut down. And for me, that's frustrating, because in my program right now, I think there are about 3 children who have tested very poorly, and I specifically told the parents they do not belong in a special education class. They belong more in either integrated or a regular preschool where they can integrate with other children and use the language that they have.
So what would you think if in fact those standardized tests for kids who are bilingual were just, eliminated, and the clinicians actually got to report what they see?
I think it would be awesome. 100% awesome. Because then we could use our clinical judgment, our prior experience, and the research that is currently being done, and we can then justify, clearly justify what it is. It doesn't read, the report does not have to read as though it were manufactured by a computer, but it clearly would describe what the child is doing or what is not doing.
Right.
I think in many cases that is a direction that the Board of Education is trying to do now. It is difficult for them to do it because I think many of the evaluators that are currently doing evaluations are used to the standardized 1 hour per child, and the types of evaluations we're talking about are really more like 2 or 3 day. You go in, maybe you observe, you speak to the parent, you call a teacher, you call...
The way it should be, right? I remember when I was in graduate school, I had 7 weeks to evaluate a child. And I'll never forget that lesson, because it taught me everything I needed to know about the child to appropriately evaluate them. These hour or even 2 hour, it never tells you what you need to know in order to appropriately evaluate a child. And I agree, evaluations should be days long. Unfortunately, the government won't pay for that,
They won't pay for it, and they won't pay for the hours that
Right.
truly hours that it takes in order to really get a good picture of what's going on with the child. And they don't want the clinician who has developed rapport with this child, who has a portfolio of all the information this child has done, whose daily notes would document what the child knows, and they do not want that particular clinician to do the evaluation because they feel it would be a conflict of interest.
So when you look back on all of your experiences as a bilingual speech-language pathologist, and when you think about the populations of children that you've worked with, particularly those on the autistic spectrum, what kind of advice can you give for our parents? With the experiences that you've had, if there's a family out there who they're bilingual Spanish and they suspect that their child has symptoms of autism, what would you recommend?
I'm sorry. My recommendation is the same I would give to any child who I would feel is in need of services. I would tell the parent to advocate for their child. I would tell the parent not to take no for an answer, to keep plugging on, and until they're able to hear, to get someone to listen to them and to hear to them, for them. I have parents now who parents who come to me and have asked me advice about not necessarily the child that I'm working with, but their older child. And they said to me, I don't think this is the right placement, but they tell me it's the only placement. And I said to them, that's not true. You as a parent can advocate for your child. You as a parent can say, I would like a change of school for my child.
It's hard for some of our families to do that.
Oh, they are extremely, they're afraid of authority, and they're afraid that something that is being given to them will be taken away if they advocate, if they take a stance. And unfortunately, right now, according to the state, the parent is the #1 advocate.
Can you say that one more time?
I said, according to the state, the parent is the #1 advocate for the child. The parent is the #1 advocate for the child.
It's very beautiful, and it's a beautiful way for us to end today's program. I wanted to thank you so much for coming today. It has been a pleasure to have you here. And thank you for sharing with our audience about bilingualism, and I hope that our audience appreciated all of the input that you shared with them. So this wraps it up for another edition of Spotlight Autism. I want to thank Andrew Bauman for letting me host today, and we'll see you again shortly. Thank you.
I'm Daniel Radcliffe, and I believe that reaching out for help is the bravest thing a person can do. If you are struggling and need support, call the Trevor Lifeline at 1-866-488-7386. It's free and confidential, and trained counsellors are there to listen 24/7 without judgment. To learn more about the Trevor Project's life-saving work for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender or questioning young people, go to thetrevorproject.org.